Okay, here we go. Welcome to our session. We'll present you the future of content editing, hopefully. I am Jonathan Noack. I'm working as a product owner at Leap, currently in one pretty big Drupal project. That's what you'll see later.
I am Jan Hoek. I'm a front-end, back-end developer at Leap, and basically built Blokkli. So I'm glad to be able to show it to you today.
Exactly. I will basically show you how it looks like from an editor's perspective, what you see, and Jan will tell you what you get when you look under the hood, how we built it, what we thought about, and everything in that regard. So how does it look like? Basically, this is what Blokkli looks like. It's a screen. You have your content in the middle. You see the page exactly how it looks like for the users. So what you see here is exactly the rendered version that the users will see when they come to your page. On the left, you have the blocks that you can drag and drop into the page, and then there are several more features which you will see in a demo in a second. So why did we build this thing? The idea was we wanted to make the creation of content easier. We were working on a project for the canton of Basel-Stadt with over 300 editors, and in this project one constraint was that most of these editors just do it like once a month. So they are not doing it as their full-time job, working in Drupal and getting to know everything in detail. So they really needed a tool that they can use, that they can see, and just start using it. They had massive amounts of content that they needed to create. Around 20 to 30,000 pages were on the old website, and most of them will be recreated on the new website. We will import some pages, but most of the content will be created from scratch on the new website because they changed the whole structure of the website, so there was no point in doing any migration from the old system. We had a new design. We had completely different kinds of paragraphs that they are able to use. The old system was Magnolia, the new one will be Drupal, so there was not really a point in thinking about migrating anything from the old system. What we try to do is provide them an instant preview. That's what you see in Blokkli. You see every time how it looks like. We try to give them some sane defaults that help them not to think too much about how it should look like. You'll see that in a second. And we gave them a minimal set of options. So they have some options that they can use to change the styling, but still the overall look should be somewhat agreeable for everyone. So we don't allow them to change the font size and the color and whatever. We just give them a set of options that they can use, so they stick to the brand more or less. We looked at some existing solutions. I'll not go into details. Of course, you all know the layout builder from Drupal, and that was not really feasible because we needed some features that the paragraphs offer. We also took a look at Gutenberg, but decided not to use Gutenberg for this project. We had some goals that we had. Most of them, Jan can give you more insights, but we tried to give them a really WYSIWYG editor. That was basically the main thing. We tried to stick as much as possible or everywhere to the separation of data and the appearance. We're working in a fully headless setup here using Nuxt and Vue in the front end, and the GraphQL API that John described in his talk before. We tried to use as much existing functionality from Drupal wherever possible, so we didn't really invent like a new kind of data structure in Drupal. And we tried, or we actually achieved that it works with any entity type that we use in Drupal. So let me give you a quick demo of how the whole thing works. Some of you were in the session yesterday, so you actually touched it already. I prepared a little page on this new website. Please don't take too many pictures and share them on Instagram because this is not live yet. So when I open the Blokkli editor, I see this page. When I open it for the first time, I get an invitation to see a tour of the features of Blokkli. This was actually a real game changer for the editors because they get to use this new tool. Initially, they are quite skeptical of, whoa, what is this? How can I use it? And here they get like a step-by-step introduction to how Blokkli works. So they see, here I can see the responsive preview. Here can I see a new window with the preview. Then we have this feature, and this feature, and this feature. So they can get through it. It doesn't take too long, but they get the whole idea of the editor. So let's talk about features. We have the WYSIWYG part. You see, you can see the content, whatever it looks like. We have a responsive preview of the whole content that will update live. So when you change something here, it's also updating here. If I want to add a new title, for example, I can just drag this component into the page. Then there opens the edit field. I can say, this is a title. I can save it, and I instantly see it in the content of the page. I can also choose if I want to have it in the table of contents up here. So I can disable it, and it instantly disappears here. If I want to place it in another place in the page, I can just drag and drop it to wherever I want. So this is quite intuitively usable for new users. I can, of course, change the text to whatever I want. And I can also transition this title to a normal text if I want. Of course, it goes the other way around if I want to change a text to a title. When editing text, we have the CK editor here, so I have all the features I know from CK, and I can also use it however I want. Then there are a few options to create content faster. So we all know that when I add an image in the traditional paragraphs, I upload it to the media library, then I enter it. Of course, we can do that here. I can put an image here, then I can select it, I can upload it. You all know the game. But we can also just drag and drop the image into the page from the local computer. So for example, let's find a picture that is not too embarrassing. Here we have some marketing material. So I drag it in, I get it in the in this clipboard on the right. I can just take it and drag it into the page, and now it's instantly in the page. We have some options that we provide on how do we display the images. They are accessible here, and I instantly see how they look like. So, talking about adding images, we have another feature that is actually quite cool and gets a lot of smiling faces when the editors use it. So when we want to add a video from YouTube, we can, of course, take the video component, add it, then add the link and do the whole thing. But we can also just go to YouTube, take Tailwind version 4, beautiful, copy the URL of this page, go back into the Blokkli editor and just paste it with the keyboard shortcut. And Blokkli instantly sees, oh, this is a link from YouTube. Probably he wants to embed a YouTube video, so it appears in this clipboard here. I can drag it in. It takes some seconds, and then I have it embedded as a video paragraph on the page. And this is a huge reliever for the editors. They can just throw in their links, and they instantly have the stuff they want here. For the videos, we also gave them some freedom in styling, so if they have a video that they want to be a bit more prominent, they can use this blue background, and it looks a bit more impressive. When we talk about features, one thing we got requested a lot is, I'm editing a page, I'm not really sure if it's good, and I want to send it to a colleague of mine. We allowed this preview here. So what we see now is an edit state. This is not published yet. And if they want to send the pre-published content to another person in the administration that is not even a Drupal editor, maybe it's just a person that knows a lot about Tailwind 4 and maybe should proofread this page, they can just create this preview link. This has like the normal node URL or the normal URL path, but it has some stuff behind. They can send this link and this page shows the edit state of the page. And if we change something in the Blokkli editor, for example, let's make a title here, it also automatically updates in real time in this preview that they can send to their colleagues. Of course, what we also can do, if we can create a live preview in this, in a full screen window on the desktop, we can also show it on mobile. And this was also quite a game changer. So they have the QR code here. They can scan this on their phone and they see a live preview on their phone while editing. And we got feedback from some editors who said like, I love this feature. I have the phone on my desk when I work on the content and they check in real time how the content looks like for mobile. And we all know mobile is hard, and in the administration they all have huge screens, so no one cares about mobile. And having this option of seeing it on their actual own mobile phone led to them trying to create more or better content for mobile users. What we can also do is we can open the node edit view by clicking on this title. This is basically a node edit view. But we can also change the title right away in the Blokkli editor. So we don't need to open the node edit view. We can just change it here and add something. And it's changed, and it's really easy to do. We added support for translations, so I can create a French version of this page. I first need to save this, and then it takes some seconds, and then I can switch to editing the French version directly in this view. Let me quickly refresh it. Or maybe we fixed the bug after the presentation. Yes. I don't know. Yesterday it was working. Yeah, usually it works. We have some other features that might be interesting for some users. We can display a grid. We can hide or show some additional information. That's not really something that people in the administration do. Something that is actually quite nice for power users, we enabled the Command K shortcut. So we have this command option where you can do basically everything-ish with just your keyboard. Everything with just your keyboard, so you never need to use a mouse, which is super cool to do. One thing that is really powerful, and that's something we added during the project and that gave us another boost, is the search function. So we can not only see what's on that page, so the paragraphs that are used, we can also search for taxonomies, media that is in Drupal. So I can either search for other content pages, but I can also search for people. So for example, I search for, let's see if I find him. It's the only guy with a picture in his profile, so I always use him for demos. Here I can search for a person that works in the administration. I can drag him into the page, and then it's automatically added as a content block for people working in the administration with his contact. And here we can have an option that displays all fields that we get from this external system. We can also use a reduced one or a minimal one with no additional information. Same goes for media. When I search for, I don't know, Tangele Museum, maybe you know it, I can just search for an image and then drag it into the page from the Drupal media library, and it's instantly added. There is also a shortcut for that, so we have some previews here when I click on media library, and I can take some pictures from here and either insert them into the page or just replace an existing image in the page with it. We have the option to show a history of what we changed. This is in the current edit state, so it's from the last time I published the page until now, and I can go through it and jump back to a point in time where I changed something, and I'm instantly back in time and can go from there. This also was quite well received because editors get hesitant to change things if they're not sure if they can revert them. And as soon as they know they have this history, they start to play around, and that's really, really good to see. We also have this overview where we see the whole structure. From like for a small page like this is not really a big deal, but for large pages, this is really useful. We have this clipboard that you have already seen. So when I paste something into the page, either a text or an image or a video, as we have seen, it appears there. So theoretically, I can also just paste in like 20 different images, and after I pasted them, I can drag them or put them wherever I want. So it's really like it feels like a clipboard. Of course, we're not listening to the clipboard on the machine all the time, but if you get used to it, it's really, really useful. We also added comments. So one requirement was they need to be able to write something, add a comment to it, and then maybe send it to someone else for editing or proofreading, or they put comments for themselves. So I can... here we have some text. I can add a comment and say, this should be better. And I can save it. And then I can do whatever I want. Go outside, have some fondue. And when I come back, or if Jan comes back and starts editing the page, he sees that there is this yellow one. He can click on it, and he sees the content of the comment. And he can answer to the comment, or he can say, this is good, this is resolved. And when you click on resolve, it disappears. That was a bit of a back and forth. Should we delete it? Should we not delete it? Should we just make it gray? But that's what we ended up with for now. We can also see an overview of the comments, also the resolved ones. And this has proven really handy. We have actually, last week I was browsing through the actual content of the new page, and I found a page with like 15 comments of a person who created the whole content, and for each paragraph she wrote, here this is missing, here I need to add this, here I must ask this guy if it's correct. And that's really cool to see. So they are not relying on some Word documents anymore that they send around. So they start to create a content here, make some notes for themselves, and before they go live in summer, they will go through the pages again and resolve the comments, hopefully, and in the end have like better content, which is what we're actually aiming for. We also added some help here with the shortcuts and everything, and try to make it as like a good tool for people who don't use it very often, with like saying defaults, with favorites, with really not too much clutter, but also give some powerful options for those people who really use it every day. And I think we found a good middle ground there. Maybe we tweak it a bit here and there, but this is Blokkli as it is now, and we're really happy how it turned out. Of course, when I'm done, I can publish it. And now a new version is created. The history is set to 0. And we can start with the next version of this content. There is also the option to change some settings. So if people want their blocks below, they can change that here. We added a setting for the scroll speed. This is due to our beloved government having really, really bad laptops that they give to their users that have insane scroll speeds, either super fast or super slow. And we cannot really do much about it. So we added this option so at least they can try to make it a little bit more useful. Yes, so this is like the perspective from the user side, and now we get the perspective from the developer side.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. If it's loading, perfect. Next one here. So let me quickly talk you through like the architecture of this whole thing. So there's two parts that are important. So there's Blokkli, which is the editor, which is basically what you have seen now. And there is also Paragraphs Blokkli, which is a Drupal module that makes all of this possible. So let me just start quickly with explaining what is Blokkli currently. So as you saw, it's a page editor, WYSIWYG, blah, blah, blah. But I think the most important thing is that Blokkli, the editor, actually doesn't change any of your data. So it's meant to be like as a generic tool for implementing any page editing. Well, it happens to work with Paragraphs Blokkli and Drupal, so that's nice. And it also has no opinion about your data structure. So in theory, you could also use it with Layout Builder or with any data structure, be it Drupal or something else. And what is it not? So I think that's important. So it's not something you can just install and forget and it just works. It doesn't even try to be that. So something like Gutenberg is much more better for this case because you can just install it. I mean, there's Drupal modules for it, and there's plenty of like components you can just enable, but Blokkli is not that. It also doesn't provide any paragraphs, so it's really do it your own. And also, unfortunately, currently it still works more like with our own specific setup. So that means with GraphQL, specifically GraphQL core schema, and also with Nuxt GraphQL middleware, which is like a GraphQL module for Nuxt, and with paragraphs. So the Drupal module, the base module is called Paragraphs Blokkli, and it implements basically the whole edit state thing. So the edit state is basically where all the changes happen that you just saw in the demo. We don't actually persist, so if you add a new paragraph, we don't actually create the entity and store it in a database, but we just store the information to create a new paragraph. And the more you add like to this mutation stack, the more entries you get basically, and only when you actually publish the changes do you get like, sorry, need a second.
So we basically put everything in a stack, and when you click publish, we go through the whole stack, and then we do the actual changes to the content. So what you see in Blokkli is just like what you did since you published the page the last time. So that's the basic idea. I think it's also more graceful to the whole backend, if not just throw thousands of requests to change the nodes, and that's why we implemented this kind of stack of changes.
Thanks a lot. I'm very nervous, maybe you notice it, so be prepared for some weird happenings now. Anyway, so maybe I just skip through like all these submodules because, well, that's just the way you do it usually. One important thing is that you have like a GraphQL schema extension, and that is the one that exposes all the mutations and options so that you can basically integrate Blokkli with your Drupal setup. So the edit state is like the thing that stores the information about what you're editing. So you can see there's like fields, there's like a host entity type, UUID. So there's not really like an entity reference because the edit state works with any entity type. So the way that it works with these mutations is that if you look at this node, for example, that has like these paragraphs, and they can also be nested. And what it does is it actually converts it into a flat structure of all the paragraphs, because that's much easier to work on. So basically, if you move a paragraph, you don't have to actually move it into another nested paragraph, but basically just move it in this flat list of proxies. So I just skip through that. It's very boring. In the end, after all these mutations are applied, it basically rebuilds the whole structure. So, I mean, this whole thing is like an entity reference revisions field that has 3 paragraphs now, and 2 of them have a total of 6 nested paragraphs. And during the whole mutation process, yeah, it's basically converted into a flat list and then converted back into like the structure that is known in Drupal. So the mutations, they work on something we call proxies. So if you move a paragraph, if you execute that mutation, you're not actually moving that paragraph, as I said, into another host field, but you just move it in that list. And most of the mutations, they work on these proxies, because that's much more performant. And each of these mutations, they are applied one by one. So that means like the same mutations, they always result in the same output. And the mutation plugin can be anything. So it can be like moving a paragraph, it can delete one, it can add a video paragraph from a YouTube URL, or actually, we also have that feature, import paragraphs from another page. So you heard about all these mutations, what a stupid word, but basically Blokkli already provides a lot of mutations. You can see on the left, there's like adding, add text, add reusable, duplicate, etc. And every mutation is basically a plugin. It's like a plugin system in Drupal. And in the annotation, you define the ID label, blah, 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 and also the arguments. So for example, here, the move mutation, obviously it's like the UUID of the paragraph it needs to move, the host type, host UUID, and then also after UUID, so after which other paragraph should it be moved. Then the mutation plugin obviously also needs to mutate something, so that's the execute method. And in this example, that's again the move example that receives all this information. So the first argument is always going to be the mutation context, from which you can get like a proxy. You can check if it's deleted, because sometimes you don't need to execute the mutation if it's anyway deleted, so you can skip that. And then yeah, it sets the host UID, entity type, field name of the paragraph, and then puts it in the correct place in the proxy list. The cool thing is with the GraphQL integration and with these annotations, it can also automatically extend the schema with new mutations. So if you, for example, add a mutation called add text from ChatGPT, you define the plugin and then cache rebuild, then it automatically generates the GraphQL mutation for you. There's a few features that are separate plugins. So for example, there's a plugin type paragraph conversion, which in the annotation you define like the source bundle, the target bundle, and then the convert method should actually implement the conversion of one paragraph bundle to another. So in this example, it converts from a title to a text, which is what we saw in the demo, and it works vice versa. So you just create a second plugin and just switch like text and section title. A bit more sophisticated is a plugin type called transforms, and they can apply to one or more paragraphs. So this example, merge text, what it does is it expects at least 2 paragraphs of bundled text, and the target bundle says like what possible bundles could be created from this plugin. And this one basically just does, you can see it on the left, you can select 2 or more text paragraphs, and then the code just merges all the text fields into one, so you actually end up with 1 paragraph. All right, so a bit about the architecture of what this works. So how this works, so the user clicks on merge texts. What happens is Blokkli, the editor, calls the apply transform plugin method of your adapter, and that one actually does the GraphQL request. And there's a mutation called apply transform, and it contains the ID merge text, and that one will then execute your transform plugin. And in the end, Drupal returns the updated state, and then Blokkli updates that in the front end, which would mean basically these two paragraphs are gone and replaced with one. All right, sorry. So I would switch to the front-end part now. So maybe there's already some questions about the Drupal part that are popping up now.
Yes?
The reply that you just explained, so it's replying the whole paragraph structure? Okay.
Yes, so you mean the edit state, the mutations? Yes, exactly. So the idea is that you only store these mutations, and on the edit state entity, it's like a field that stores this plugin configuration for every mutation. And basically every time you open the editor, refresh, it takes in the state of the node or whatever host entity, it applies all the mutations, and then returns like the result of it. And that allows us basically to do undo, redo, because we can just switch like the index pointer to like previous state, and then it just executes the mutations up to this point.
So you're operating on a specific field of the host entity?
Yes, it can be one or more. So the input is always like the host entity. It could be like a header, content, footer reference field. And you can also move paragraphs, obviously, between fields if it's allowed. So that also works. Yeah. All right. Then I will continue with the front-end part. So currently, the front-end part is a single NPM package, which I'm still struggling to get that nice namespace, Blokkli. So there's an NPM issue pending to get that. Anyway, until then, it's released under Blokkli -beta, which is a bit boring. So this NPM package is a Nuxt module. So it implements the whole editor as you see it, and also the entire, let's say, developer experience, because these things don't render themselves. It was important for me to have like no CSS leaking, because nothing I hate more than using a library and then it basically borks your CSS, and then that was the requirement so it doesn't leak anything. Promise. It exposes 3 components. So the first one is the Blokkli provider. So that's like the view component that wraps your host entity, basically. We'll get to that later. The second component is Blokkli field, which basically corresponds to an entity reference relations field in Drupal. And the third component, which is under the hood, so you don't interact with it, but it's basically the one that will render your correct paragraph component. There's like a composable called define Blokkli, and with that you actually define which view component you want to use to render, for example, the title paragraph. Well, that's a bit boring, but the adapter is actually the heart of Blokkli. So you have to think of Blokkli as something, an over-engineered way of rendering paragraphs. Because you can actually use it without the editor, and it will just render paragraphs based on an array of objects. But basically, all of that is needed so the editor works. And the goal was to make it agnostic of any backend, of any whatever. So that's why actually implementing the functionality, the backend calls, is done via this adapter. And obviously, there is already an adapter that makes it work with Paragraphs Blokkli Drupal module. So yeah, I mean, we talked about it. So the example of moving a paragraph, this is basically what happens. I guess it's also important to note that the frontend, your frontend app, has no knowledge about which bundles are allowed in a field, for example, because Blokkli will just load that information when the editor starts, so it knows, aha, okay, this field, field paragraphs footer, basically only the bundle text is allowed, for example. So that keeps the frontend basically unaware of all the specifics in Drupal. The frontend just says, okay, this is this field with this name, basically. And also important, you can have actually a minimal working example because not all adapter methods, there's like 50, need to be implemented. So if you don't implement duplicate blocks, then the editor will just not show the duplicate button. So yeah, that's the minimal example. You can also find it in the repository. That's all you need to render a list of paragraphs. At the top, you can see the provider. So it expects 3 props, which is the entity type, entity bundle, and UUID. The Blokkli field expects an array of blocks and paragraphs, whatever, and also the name of the field. In this minimal example, obviously there's no Drupal involved. It's just basically rendering the blocks defined in the array on the left using the components defined on the right bottom. So you can see define Blokkli, you define the bundle it is, and then Blokkli automatically will make sure that this array on the left will render all these paragraphs the right way. So it was also very important for me to have minimal overhead at runtime. So we don't obviously want to include the whole editor for just anonymous visitors to the page. So when not in edit mode, basically, well, actually none of the edit stuff is loaded because that's basically, it's just loaded on demand. And same is for all these requests you can see. So the moment you start the editor, it gets like a list of all bundles from Drupal, the field configuration, and so on, the comments. 1 second, need some water. All right. Another cool feature is the editable fields. So it's nice and all that you can drag and drop paragraphs and so on, but it would be, it's quite nice if you can actually edit like text on demand. And then you can just double click on a text field and then edit the text directly. So you do that by using the vBlokkli editable directive, and you define the field name, which is the Drupal machine name for it, and the Blokkli gets then basically from Drupal a list of all these possible text fields and what type they are. So Blokkli knows that field body on this specific paragraph or entity is a rich text field. So what it does, it gets a bit ugly now, but it basically renders CK editor from Drupal in an iframe, because I'm not going to re-implement all the CK editor stuff in Blokkli. But that way, you can basically have all the CK editor features inside Blokkli in an iframe. I guess it's a good trade-off. For non-rich text fields, well, that's easy. I can just render a normal text area. And that also works quite nice. Another feature are the droppable fields. So not only can you annotate like text fields in a view component, but you can also annotate media reference fields. And what they allow is that you can, from the media library, just drag and drop a media entity and replace it somewhere. So currently it only works with a cardinality of 1. Haven't implemented any index stuff yet, but that might come at a later stage. Right. You can not only edit paragraphs in the setup, you can also edit the node title or node header image, whatever, and it works the same. You just annotate the place where you actually rendered the title, for example, and then the editor, when you double-click that element, it will render the text area, and when you hit save, it will update it on the node. And again, it will not actually persist it will just add a mutation that does that. Yeah, that's how you define the paragraph component using define Blokkli. There's a few nice features there. You can define options. You saw it in the demo, like background color and so on. So it was important to like differentiate between appearance and data structure. So Drupal should remain the master of data structure, but the frontend should basically be able to define like all these options. And that's how you do it in the composable. It's all nice type safe, etc. You can define various types of options So a few examples like checkboxes, radios, multi-select, and so on. And they're actually stored as behavior data on the paragraph. Thanks to John, he also implemented a way that you can edit these same options also in a normal Drupal form. So the behavior plugin basically takes a JSON file that Blokkli generates, and based on that, it then dynamically generates the same options that you have in Blokkli, also in the paragraphs behavior form. Speaking of behaviors, a component can also define, okay, a bit of a backstory. That's something, because previously we were doing layout builder, and something that I didn't like is that the drag and drop stuff is always connected directly to the root of an element. And a good example is like a button that you can just place like in a top level field of a node. And if it's in this case, then it has to render a container, because other paragraphs like sliders, they require full width. So this feature basically allows you to say, okay, for drag and drop, actually only the button should be used. So it ignores the container. So editors, if they click left or right of the button, even though it's the component, it actually doesn't do anything. Oh boy. Another nice feature. I mean, a lot of you are probably aware of it, but sometimes you have like these one-off components. So in this example, something like a call to action section that looks the same on all pages. And previously, what would you do? Maybe you have some paragraph that provides the data structure that makes sense for this call to action section. And if not, you unfortunately have to create a paragraph type call to action section, and then only create one entity of it, and then via a library make it reusable. Fragments solve that a bit in a sense that there's a paragraph type called Blokkli fragment that has a single field, which is called Blokkli fragment name, and the actual components. So here are a few examples, like a call to action section, a GitHub star button, or the main menu links. They are defined in the front end. So they don't get any data from Drupal, but they're basically just stored as like a paragraph type, paragraph bundle fragment. And that way you can have like all these random one-off things available to editor for drag and drop without having to create like a new paragraph types for it. Yeah, so if you feel fancy and want to dive into extending Blokkli, that's also possible, because everything Blokkli offers is implemented in a modular way. So literally the button to close the editor is also implemented as a feature. This example here is maybe something more useful. This is a feature. This is the feature that basically implements deleting a block or a paragraph, and it just uses like a plugin component, like an item action, delete with icon delete, and then it has a handler on click what to do. And in this case, it calls the adapters delete blocks method with these UIDs. So it's very easy to extend the editor with custom functionality. So in fact, for one client, we added a country toggle so that you can actually see like preview of the, so they have like content specific for countries. And it's super easy to implement with Blokkli because you can just define like an option on the paragraph, like country, so for which country is it visible. And then inside Blokkli, you can implement like a custom editor feature where you can toggle between country and you instantly see like, okay, this is how it looks like in Switzerland, in Germany, and so on. Okay, so a bit of a pain point for me personally is like drag and drop. So if anyone has had to work or had the pleasure to work with the native drag and drop API in web, it doesn't work. So that's why there's tons of like libraries that do it for you. But the problem is, I mean, they always only work for like simple to-do lists where you have like one line of text and just drag and drop it, and then that's it. But what we have here is, so Blokkli now supports unlimited nesting, by the way. So you can have like 10 levels of paragraph nesting. Not that you should do that, but you could. But yeah, that adds some problems with like drag and drop libraries that don't really know that. And initially, I used Sortable.js, which is like basically the Swiss Army knife of drag and drop stuff. But yeah, the main problem is that it's very unreliable in regards to where can you drop stuff. Because if you have 10 levels of nesting, it can get tricky to know, okay, where can I actually drag and drop it? And the problem is like with animations. So if you drag maybe like a huge section, 2 paragraphs to the top, and if you animate it the whole time, then it can get very irritating because like all of this layout shift happens. And basically under the hood, what all these libraries have to do is like, they have to rebuild the whole layout to know if I drop something here, well, is it flexbox, is it grid, is it float? So what direction will it actually shift? And that's quite tricky. And I just didn't want any of that, so built it myself. And the way it works is that no animations. So it's actually the moment you start dragging something, it determines like where are potential places where you could drop that. And it's a hard problem, so it doesn't work quite good yet, but it works for simple things like grid, and it checks like, is it grid, which direction does it go? It's like flex, and then flex column, row, etc. So it tries its best to do that, and the fallback is always going to be just a horizontal, a vertical line where you can drop it. All right, a bit about the future. So as I already said in the beginning, it's very tight still to Drupal and everything. But while the editor is quite modular and everything, it still needs a bit of work. And the first important step is to remove the hard dependency on Nuxt, because currently you can literally only use it in a Nuxt headless setup. The goal is to at least have it in a second step as a view library, so you can actually use it like as a SPA in a Drupal rendered page, basically. And the other dependency to remove is like the reliance on Blokkli field and Blokkli provider, because what they essentially do is they just set some data attributes on the element. So for example, the drag and drop action, it just goes through the DOM and checks, okay, this block paragraph with this UID, it goes up the parents and sees, it's this field. It goes up again more, it's this provider. So that's how it knows the information. And in theory, you don't need view for that. You can just do that with some pre-process hooks and add these same data attributes to like the rendered paragraphs or field item lists. And the goal in the end is basically to have something that works also for like classic Drupal rendering. But the main problem, I think, is that with the architecture, you would have to re-render the whole page after every mutation, because that's just like how that state works, like input mutations and then return or the rendered output. But maybe it's possible, would be nice. And in general, just having some more adapters for people that love to use Layout Builder, that would be possible. Already now, you could implement that quite easily, I guess. And what I think could also be nice is to extract like the whole mutations edit state thing into like a separate module, so that it's not bound to paragraphs. I mean, I love paragraphs, but maybe there's better things, who knows, or other things. So that could be could also be an option. Well, that's an old slide. Ignore that. All of it is already open source, so I'm not showing that slide. I've actually started to prepare like a demo setup of the Drupal module and Nuxt and everything, but I'm struggling with default content, so it will take some the weekend to fix that. But check out the GitHub repository for Blokkli. There you can find the editor, the Nuxt module, and on Drupal.org you can find Paragraphs Blokkli, and soon on GitHub as well you will find the demo repository.
Thank you very much. You can also go to block.li, and there you can actually edit the page, so you can like see how it feels like if you would edit that page. It's all happening in your local storage, so it will not be applied to the website. Thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you very much, Jan, for countless hours working on this thing. fixing bugs when editors complained. Thank you, John, for providing very useful help all the time. And I hope you give it a try and maybe use it in your projects and maybe contribute back to the module. Thank you. Do we still have time for questions?
We don't have time for questions, but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we'll be at a fondue, so you can ask us questions there. All right, I think that's the next point on our schedule is the fondue. So.
It's a masterpiece.